You've come back into the city and have headed east, and you're now at Redcliffe School, and as you can see behind the school, the cliffs of Redcliffe came tumbling down after that 2011 February earthquake here in Canterbury. In Marion, the school was closed back in 2011, hasn't reopened due to the danger of rockfall, and rockfall is one of many of the effects of an earthquake, and it all depends on the type of earthquake that you can have.
Well, it depends on what the ground is like around you. There are several things that happen with earthquakes. So an earthquake's caused by a crack in the ground where one side, the rock, moves in a different direction from the other. And that might get right up to the surface and form a big crack along the surface that might make a step or move along like this. So that's one thing that can happen. And if your house were sitting on that, then it might get sliced in half. That doesn't happen to very many houses because it's a very, very small area that thing affects. But the other thing that happens is as the rock breaks, it shakes, and it shakes over a very big area. And that can cause a lot of damage to houses, although in New Zealand we actually don't do too bad because we build our houses good and strong. Sometimes taller buildings can be affected even worse than smaller ones. And then the other thing that can happen if you've got the right sort of soil is you can get what we call liquefaction, especially if that soil is wet. So the ground shaking actually makes the water get up through the soil, and it all starts to behave as if it was water. And that means that houses start to sink down into it. Sometimes you get material behaving a little bit like a fountain, squirting out of the ground. And in other places, you'll get that it behaving like it's flowing water down towards rivers or downhill, and you'll get cracks opening up behind. We call that lateral spread. But you need a particular type of soil for that. And then the other thing that you can get is exactly this sort of thing, where you get rockfall. Sometimes the rocks come tumbling over each other, we call that rockfall. Or sometimes the whole soil comes down in one, and we call that a landslide. All of these can happen when the ground shakes with an earthquake.
And so we're talking of landslides, because that is another hazard. Yep. You've got the earthquakes that can cause landslides. There are other things, of course, that can cause landslides.
Yeah, very much so. Most of the landslides that happen in New Zealand happen more because the ground is very wet. So heavy rainfall can cause steep slopes to start to move, so that the top part of the soil starts to move on downhill. And that's especially where you've not got any vegetation, you've not got trees and grass binding that together. They can start to move off down the hill in as a landslide.
So given the fact that we do live in a geologically active country and there's been many earthquakes over the recent years, what have we learned, and how can that help us going forward?
Well, some of these things only happen in certain places, and we can know in advance where some of those places are. So, for example, the liquefaction, there's only a particular type of soil, some soils that do that. So we can work out where they are, and then we can either choose not to build there, or if we do build there, we can build stronger and on foundations that can float a little, so that those buildings aren't nearly so damaged. And things like here, we can perhaps build our houses a little bit further away from those steep slopes, or we can put up fences to catch the rocks as they come down, or as we've done along here, by the road along here, put mesh up to hold the rocks back in place. So you can put some safety measures around some of those things in advance before an earthquake happens.
Hey, thanks, Marion. I'll just say also that if you want to find more about the geology of natural hazards and earthquakes and that sort of thing, take part in Life at the Boundary, the field trip that's happening in 2 weeks with Shelley Hersey, the field trip teacher. So make sure you check that out and get your teacher to enrol. Thanks, Marion.
My pleasure.